Welcome to Chizuba Talks, a podcast where we shine a light on the incredible work of nonprofit organizations and the people behind them. In each episode, we interview leaders from nonprofits that are making a difference in their communities and the world. We hear firsthand about the mission and impact of the organizations, as well as the challenges and triumphs they face in their work. Our aim is to inspire and inform our listeners about the critical role that nonprofits play in addressing some of the most pressing issues of our time. We hope that by sharing these stories, we can also raise awareness and support for the invaluable work of nonprofits. Today, we are joined by Crystal Emerick, founder and executive director at Bravestep, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Bravestep is an organization that is dedicated to preventing sexual violence and supporting survivors. Crystal has been working in the field since 2014 and has been instrumental in providing meaningful steps on victims' healing journeys. Thank you for joining us today, Crystal.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Crystal, at the outset, let me commend you for your phenomenal courage. You are a survivor yourself. How long did it take for you to heal and move beyond personal trauma to healing others?
Oh, well, thank you, Tej. It's still a healing journey for me. I am not done, and I have to say I'll be working on my own healing for the rest of my life, I suspect. But I was sexually traumatized as a child, and then several accounts when I was in my early 20s. And it was at that time that I then spent 10 years doing a specialty therapy called EMDR. And then I stopped for a little while because I thought I was well, I thought I was good, I thought my journey was over. And then yet again, more of the trauma began to surface a few years ago. And so I'm back in therapy, and I imagine, quite frankly, I will forever be, just because this is sexual trauma. Ultimately, I feel like it rewrites our DNA, and to move to a place of well-being is really a lifetime journey. I remember when I started, and I've heard this from countless survivors, they want an endpoint. They want a finale. And unfortunately with this, there's no finale. There are stages of being well. There's stages of kind of a continued journey of healing. And then you oscillate between the two, I believe.
Right. It must be traumatic for you to, even think about these things. And whenever you hear a story that is coming to you from the victims, everything might be just resurfacing, right? How do you deal with that?
Well, you alluded to this in the first question. I have moved to a place where I can tell my story, where I can hear stories without it triggering me, which is a wonderful place to be in. But there are times that I carry those stories to bed. Times I wake up thinking about certain survivors and where they are on their path. I'm really lucky that I have developed over many, many years some pretty good coping skills, healthy coping skills to help manage my trauma. But I think the point of it is for all survivors, when we are victims of this horrible crime, that trauma manages us. And our goal, both mine and others, is to eventually be able to manage the trauma. And so I'm fortunately at a place where I can mostly manage it most days. And obviously we want to help other survivors get to that point too.
Right. So you have sessions for victims, or you have, legal assistance. What are the ways that your organization helps people?
Yeah. I love talking about what we do because it's a little different than a lot of organizations, but we really believe that we walk alongside a survivor on their journey and offer them, for adult survivor care, we have 5 options, if you will. And we don't require a participant to start at one place or to end at one place. It is very much their choice and their power to make that decision. But we do, at a high level, we do individual counseling with adult proven trauma modalities. We do group therapy, peer support groups, which I believe are magical. And then we also do what we call empowerment programs and finding one's voice. And the empowerment is really
Mhm.
skills development. How do I, implement coping skills? What are boundaries, and how do I start using those? And then finding your voice is music therapy, art, journaling, spoken word, but giving survivors a way to articulate what's inside of them in a healthy and cathartic approach.
Right. And these are all different programs. So I don't know how to ask this, but depending on the severity of the crime, is there some kind of segregation that you do for victims?
We when we do our intakes with survivors, we really want to know what they want and where they are. They know better than I do, at least at a high level, what they're capable of doing. The severity varies. One of our amazing psychologists on our advisory board, he always says that, the earlier it happens, and in particular, by whom, meaning if it's someone that was trusted, like a family member
Right.
or an ally, which majority of the time it is, that severity
Hmm.
is much deeper. So I also, another analogy is, for a child survivor of sexual trauma, that mold has been growing in their basement for decades. I mean, literally decades. And it's overtaken the house. And the sooner you can start dealing with that mold growing in the house, the quicker or the slightly easier the process to get well. And I think the same thing is with sexual assault later in life. The sooner you can start dealing with what happened, the shorter the trajectory of getting to a place of being good with it.
Having said that, there are many victims who still don't come out. There are so many victims who rather keep silent than go out and say this. What can we do for such people?
Yeah, well, I think I always say that I'm in the business of planting seeds. And by that, we plant a lot of seeds of inspiration. Your podcast will plant seeds with someone who hears this, who goes, oh, that happened to me, but I'm not ready. So we plant a lot of seeds, and then over time, we hope that they get watered and then eventually can take root. I think as allies, as supporters, the best thing we can do is say, I believe you. I'm here with you, and I'm willing to walk alongside of you, even though it's very uncomfortable and very hard. So I think we plant seeds and then we support those who have been impacted.
Right. I think how important is it for the people who are living with the victim? I'm using the word victim. I don't like it, but uh, the family members. Obviously, we are expecting them to be cooperative. We are expecting them to be empathetic. Does this happen, or is there are people ostracized?
Oh, that's a hard one. So I think, like, for loved ones or allies living with a survivor, it's really hard. You don't innately have the skills, the language, the ability to stand in that space effectively. Yet, we as survivors, we expect you to. We expect you to show up and know what to say and what to do. And that's one of the great things. We started a program about 3 years ago to teach loved ones how to show up, how to use the right language, how to process their own trauma. There is enough evidence out there that indicates that a loved one of a survivor has a similar level, a first level of trauma by being a loved one of a survivor. And so, we hold two challenges. We hold the challenge of being a loved one effectively, and then we also hold the challenge of being a loved one who needs to process their own anger, guilt, confusion. And so it's really hard to step in that space. But the thing that I believe wholeheartedly is if we can teach loved ones and allies how to be effective and empathetic, we can truly begin to change this cycle of sexual trauma. It's going to take a while, but I think that is probably the most effective place to start.
Yeah, and you do have programs like that at your
Yes,
organization, correct?
we do. And we
Yeah, that's
offer those
wonderful.
virtually and in person, so anyone can participate, and it's free.
That's wonderful. Isn't that great? Sometimes I also feel that just being there for the person is very important, even if you may not know what to say.
Yeah.
Words are, of course, important, but just being there also is very important. True. Yeah.
I think that is so true.
Can you tell
And
me?
even, I'm sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that is so true. And even outside of trauma itself, I mean, in friendly relationships or intimate partner relationships, sometimes, as you know, you just want someone to listen. We don't want them to answer it. We don't
Absolutely.
want them to fix it. We just want them to hear us, like genuinely hear us. And I think to your point, just being able to sit there and listen to them is it's a huge step.
Yeah, true, true. Crystal, tell me about your staff and your volunteers. Are they trained, and what are the ways in which they surround themselves with the kind of people that they are working with?
Yeah. So our we have a small staff. We have myself and then two part-time people with clinical backgrounds, and both of them have done an extensive amount of work in trauma with children, teens, and adults, and so that really helps. The thing, Tej, that I learned early on is that you can have every bit of education that you need to do sexual trauma or trauma in general, but there's this innate empathy that has to be present as well. And if you don't have that, no matter how much education you have, you can't be as effective as someone who has the education and the empathy. That was one of my really big revelations when we first started. I remember one of our advisory board members said, Crystal, they can have every degree on the wall, but if they don't have the empathy to do this work, then they're going to be
So true.
ineffective. And so, I mean, I think that's true. We
Absolutely
do
true.
a lot of work on continuing education so that we can continually learn and learn how to be the best possible selves we can be in that space.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you have two people with you working on this.
Yes.
Okay. Do you also involve survivors in your decision-making processes, or shaping the services that you provide?
Absolutely. In fact, they inform a lot of what we do. We can come to the table with ideas, but unless we ask them what they want in terms of programs, then we're just kind of running in circles. And we do that a lot of times a year that we survey our participants. And then also our program manager has quarterly sessions with our peer leaders who are all volunteers who are also survivors. And she uses them as a focus group to gather feedback on what we can do differently and better.
Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? Because they are the ones who've been through that, and they would be the best people to tell what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
True. And what about your partnerships? Do you have any partnerships with any other organization?
Yes, we do. We partner with
Do
several nonprofits in this region. And part of that is because partnerships, well, I'll back up. I am a firm believer that we can't do this work in a silo. We need a village to be effective and to really, surround that survivor and loved one with the tools they need. And so we have cultivated several relationships here in this area to allow us to expand our service, but also to create a more holistic approach. So, for example, one nonprofit that we love, they do a lot of work with incarcerated men and women. And we know, statistically speaking, those who have been incarcerated, I think in the number is 65 to 70% have experienced trauma as a child. And so we come in alongside of them to be able to offer our services. And again, just to kind of round out the experience they get to have.
Yeah. Let's take a break to understand what Jazuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state-of-the-art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Jazuba began with this very vision. a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chizuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chizuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chizuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest. Do you have any success stories or examples of how your organization has made a positive impact in the lives of
Oh,
survivors?
yeah, I can remember one
I'm
in
sure you have
particular.
many.
Yes, there's one though that I never can shake this story. It was years ago when I was leading one of our peer groups, and I remember this girl, two of them actually. I'll share two quick stories. One walked in and she had like a hoodie over her face, and you could barely see her eyes. I mean, she was just almost invisible the way she had kind of adorned herself that day. And she sat very slumped in her chair, would not make eye contact, really would not speak. And that continued for about 3 sessions. And slowly, Tej, you could see her body language. She would sit up, you could start to see her eyes. And over the course of about a year and a half, literally this individual transformed right before my eyes. And it gives me chills to think about the trust that she began to build with us, that she could trust us. Eventually
So
she would allow us
important.
to hug her. And that, I mean, just to see her physical, much less the mental growth, was amazing. But a similar group, another girl came in and she gave us a fake name right out of the gate. And she wouldn't say a word. She was also kind of a silent participant, if you will. And again, over the course of time, she began to be more vocal. And then she began to start to kind of lead, kind of organically lead some of the group. And, by the end of her time with us, which was, I would say about 3 years, she was kind of a voice you could count on within those groups. And we really showed up when she struggled, and she showed up when others struggled. And it was, I don't know, those are the stories that remind me that we're doing good in the
You're
world.
doing the right thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it takes a lot for them to even, you know, show up,
Yeah.
forget to talk about it immediately. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, how can survivors access your services, Crystal?
The easiest way is to go to our website, bravestep.org, and then explore what we have that feels right for you. Tej, we do several virtual trainings or webinars throughout the year, and that's open to anyone at any time, and it's free. And then we also do individual, group, and peer support. So depending on their need, we really want to try to meet them where they are on their journey.
So I would think that, when you go to a particular, say, a school or an institution and you're giving your talk, after your talk, I would presume that there would be people coming up and talking to you
Yes, it never
because
failed
not
that
everybody is able to,
yeah.
sorry,
No,
not
exactly.
everybody is able to come up and, take the initiative and say that I need help. But if you go and present a talk or a webinar, I'm sure after the talk, there will be people coming in.
It always happens. It never fails. And you prepare yourself for that. And I think because they feel so empowered at the moment to hear someone else who has a similar story. And so I think it's momentum, but they just feel compelled to share. And for those who don't want to share, verbally, a lot of times I get emails after that says, I heard you talk. Me too. I'm a survivor. And then we kind of explore what, if anything, they want to do next.
True, true. I say this from personal experience because I was teaching in a school, and when we talk about the good touch, the bad touch, and things like this that happen, generally after that talk, in that day, I will have a few of them come up and say, this is what happened to me, but I didn't know how to categorize it. So, yeah, that's how it is. So, well, Crystal, I think I don't know. Do you have any situation where there is an emergency and you get a call? Of course, people will be calling 911, I suppose. But
Yeah.
do you have did you ever have a situation where you got a call and you said, "I need help now"?
Oh, yeah. One of those individuals that I mentioned earlier, I remember when she first started with us, she was suicidal a lot. And I would get, calls late at night, early in the morning on a weekend, where she was, contemplating a suicide. And thankfully, I had taken some persuade, refer training, suicide prevention training. So I was able to effectively support her in that space. But I would say for anyone who is in crisis and needing to speak to someone, at least here in the United States, there are a lot of 1-800 numbers that you can get at any point in any time to have someone that will listen and help talk you through that moment of crisis.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. And yeah, I would just say that the help that you're providing is life saving. It is something that all. So that brings me to a question: do you have women who approach you, or are they men also?
90% of our survivors are women, but we do have the 10% that are men. I it's so much harder for a man to come forward about their trauma. Both it's against society, it's against culture, and then also the way that this industry supports survivors, it's so much more geared to women. But yes, we do have men. And I'll also say, Tej, with our new loved ones program, we are seeing a lot of men come forward to try to learn how to be in that space. And I'm so impressed. One, by their bravery, because this is just not a fun subject, right? No one wants to spend their time learning how to be a more effective
Absolutely.
ally. And yet, they're showing up, especially in that loved one space. So I'm just I admire their courage to be able to do that.
Right. And do you also have legal assistance in terms of, if somebody is feeling abused, do you help the person report the person who is inducing that?
Yeah. We do not, that's not one of our specialties, but typically here
That's
at
not.
rape crisis centers, most of them have legal counsel or legal aid that they can provide. So that would be the right place. We do have several legal firms that we can refer out to, but we don't do that in
Hmm.
house here.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think that's the safest way to go about it.
Yeah.
Well, Crystal, would you like to share your social media handles and tell us on the podcast if anybody wants to reach you for volunteering? Which reminds us, how did you know about Chizuba?
Well, we were looking for a skilled volunteer that could help us in particular do translation work. We're seeing a lot more survivors from the Latinx community come in, and we needed more materials translated to be effective for them. So I literally was Googling and I found Chizuba and we signed up. The process was so easy for us. We got an incredible volunteer he translated, I want to say about 6 materials and a lot of material within each one. And it was
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. We don't have the budget to be able to hire someone to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
So to be able to find a trusted, skilled volunteer, it was like a gift. It was a huge donation to us in time and expertise.
Wonderful. That's great to hear, Crystal. Chezuba is always there to help, and this is what we are doing through this podcast as well. We're able to share your stories to everybody. And yes, so people who have been sexually assaulted often experience a range of emotions and reactions, and no two survivors of assault will feel the same way about their experience, right? It may take years for someone to be able to talk about their experience, but being in a peer group where you talk about what was done to them can definitely help someone feel that they are not alone in this fight or in this struggle. Thank you so much, Crystal. It takes a lot of courage to do what you are doing, which is amazing in itself. Best wishes to you and all the brave hearts at Bravestep. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. See you all in the next episode where we meet courageous and inspirational people here at Chizuba Talks. Till then, goodbye.